Okay, good. Let's start over live from New York. I'd like to thank you for our first technology glitch. There will be more. But this evening, we're live on location in the beautiful Napa Valley at one of our favorite places to come, relax, be with good friends, taste fantastic wine. And I'm, of course, speaking of Tamber Bey Vineyards here in Calistoga. And we are with a very, very gracious gentleman who was kind enough to lend us this spot this evening, Barry Waitte, owner, founder of Tamber Bey Vineyards. Cheers.
Cheers to you. Thank you very much. Nice to have you here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having us. This is, again, one of the most idyllic properties in all of Napa. You've got the abundance of equine animals. That one we have to keep an eye on because that's a boom mic eating the microphone cord. Tell us where we are. Tell us the madness and passion of wine and equestrian. How did all this come about?
Well, first, where we are. We are at the Tamber Bey Winery located at the Sundance Horse Ranch. We're north of the town of Calistoga by about 2 miles. And this is a bit of a historic, though not long-lived, a horse ranch here. It was built in 2002, and it became historic actually in the rescue operations that we've had over the years with the fires. And we became not only one of the largest facilities to take in animals over these fires, but we also became one of CAL FIRE's regional headquarters in our parking lot. So we got known for a couple of things other than making wine and having horses here. But other than that, we've owned this property since 2012. My wife and I are very big equestrians, hence also naming our wine after our first 2 Arabian horses, Tamburina and Bay.
Okay.
And then their barn names were Tamber and Bay. And I didn't have any other reason to name it after myself or my kids, so I just showed it my horses.
I like it. Now, most people kind of get bit by a wine bug early on and then want to pursue that passion. When did you get bit by the equestrian bug?
So that came a little bit late in life. I didn't ride my first horse until I was 38 years old. A friend of mine did what I'll call an extreme sport.
Right.
And it's long distance horse racing. And not to go into a lot of details, but for our audience, this is 50 to 100 mile single day races on one horse over cross country. So these are the type of trails that you would be hiking on. And we do these races 50 to 100 miles in one day. And I'm a rider now, but my friend did this before. And when I first heard of him doing this sport, I actually thought he was nuts. I mean, why would you want to spend 5, 10, 20 hours on a
I think
on
he's
a
nuts
horse?
now.
He's still nuts. Well, I joined that nut crew. And but I thought of it first as a challenge. And I said, okay, I got to do that once. And at the end of my first race, after learning how to ride a horse and training for about 3 years to do this, I said something that is I've said every day since I finished the race. The next time I can do better. And so therefore there is a next time, and there was a next race, and there was another horse, and that was 20 years ago. And but Jennifer and I have both taken this sport very seriously. I'm a 2-time national champion, but on the U.S. equestrian team. Have other accolades.
Where have you been hiding
this.
that from us?
Well, it's in a closet. We don't let it out too often.
It's incredible. I mean, the property is incredible, and you still have Thomas Rivers Brown crafting wine, I believe. And
Thomas Rivers Brown and Derek Flegel.
Okay.
Derek is our new, not so new. He's been with us for about 4 years, but he was elevated last year as our full-time winemaker. Thomas is still very much involved in this project by a lot. But Derek comes from great pedigree. I'm talking Aaron Pott, Heidi Barrett, blended for 3 years with one of his prior assignments with Michel Roland.
Okay.
Has worked with Barber and other vineyard managers. He's an up and comer in our world, and I was very fortunate to have him come on board as an assistant winemaker about 4 years ago. And so we bumped him up last year. Unfortunately, for the 2020 vintage.
Right.
So we didn't make much wine out of that.
Right.
But he's got great prospects, and I love his energy, his thought. And though he has these great mentors, he's got his style.
Okay.
And I'm can't wait to start showing that off.
No, that'll be exciting too, because you're right. Those mentors are in a class by themselves. So to be able to pull a little bit from each one and then impart that into the fruit that is coming off the vine, that'll be kind of special.
It will be. It will be.
So hospitality is near and dear to your heart. You travel the country bringing Tamber Bay wines to people, but you also have this beautiful establishment. So how do people come visit?
They make an appointment. It is both regulated by our ordinance, but it's also, we are so busy. It's just proper to do that. A busy day for us here is 40 to 60 people.
Okay.
And we want to keep it intimate. We want to keep it personal. So people just give us a call, make an appointment on their before they come out, hopefully a couple weeks in advance, especially if it's on weekends.
Right.
And we'll give an experience that you won't get in Napa Valley. No one else is offering the type of experience that we give, that sits on top of an equestrian facility where you have horses all around you. And I haven't found a person yet that doesn't like a horse. They may be afraid of them,
Right.
but they still love them. And then you get to taste a portfolio of wines. Now I make now 16 different wines. And so
And growing.
apparently.
Exactly.
And so we give a truly great experience. We offer also lunches and charcuterie boards and things of that nature. So people hang here for a while.
Yeah, I
which is
can see
really,
why.
yeah, it's just so relaxing, and that's the environment that we want to give.
Well, and speaking of people hanging here and hospitality, I know you have to jump and go to a gig because you've got a private dinner this
I've got
evening.
a dinner tonight, so I'm going to step out, put my tie on, and get on.
You are
with that.
not putting a tie on.
No, I'm not. I just
Okay.
like it. So it's been a long time,
Good.
but I appreciate you coming here. It's a pleasure to have you on the property. Have your guests show it off a little bit. Yeah, that is quite a backdrop back there.
Yeah.
So that's very
not
nice.
terrible. Beats the
Okay.
green screen.
Yeah,
Cheers.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tamber Bay, everybody.
Enjoy.
Let's give it up.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you, sir. And when we come back from commercial, now the man of the hour, Ignacio Delgadillo, is in the house. Do the kids still do that?
Are we doing that?
You can put those on if you want.
Oh, no, it's all right.
So Iggy and I first met when Iggy was just out of high school, single,
Just out of high school? Yeah. Yeah.
now married, children, still loving the life, still crafting great wine. And one of the things that endeared us to Ignacio was really the life story of your father, you growing up in the vineyard. Walk everyone kind of through a little bit of that 90 seconds, 2 minutes. Perfect. The Delgadillo Cellars story.
Okay. Yeah. So my dad, he started making wine. Well, he started in Napa in the early 70s. Started making wine by first working in the vineyard, and then started working in the cellar, and eventually became cellar master over at Freemark Abbey, which is our little treat that we have here today. And he was there for about 22 years, and that's really what developed his sort of style for wine. So then in 96, he retired from being a cellar master from his wine, because at the time he was cellar master. He had started his own business, and he was a vineyard manager at the time, plus having kids and trying to be a family man and all that fun stuff. So then the company he had started in '88 was making the wooden boxes with his business partner. So then at that point he had 20 employees and no supervisors. So he's like, well, something's got to go. So he retired from winemaking to pursue that. And for him, he thought, well, this was a chance where I get to just buy the cases of wine that I love and can enjoy, and just, not worry about making anymore. And over a period of time, he always kept going back to these old bottles of Freemark Cab that he used to make. And he said, anytime he got a new wine, he said, well, this wine is lacking this wine's lacking that. And then finally in about 2000, I told him, I said, hey, Dad, you know how to make wine. Why don't you stop complaining and make wine the way that you like to do
something?
Yeah, do something about it. So 2000 was probably our first hobby vintage. And then after that, I don't know if it was already like in the cards, he was thinking about it, or maybe I nudged him in that direction. But 2001 was our first official vintage. And so then we aged that for about 3 years in French oak barrel. And then after 6 months in bottle, we drank it, or my dad drank it. He said, you know what, could wait a little bit longer. So we waited a year, waited 2 years, waited 3 years. And finally we didn't release that bottle of 2001 until April of 2009.
Oh, geez.
So that's kind of how we got started, and that's kind of how the aging process started. Is my dad wanted to release the wine when he thought it was ready, and not have you take the wine home and say, hey, it's going to be ready in 5 years. So so we took that part very seriously, especially after we put Delgadillo on the label, which is our family name.
Well, and it's interesting too. And you were the first winery that I knew of that really aged the wines that specifically to age, because economically it's suicide from a standpoint
Yeah,
of that.
it makes no business sense whatsoever. Yeah.
To age a wine for 6 years prior to release, yeah, done in Spain a lot,
Mhm.
done in Italy in some cases, but was never done in Napa Valley. Now there might be a handful of people doing it, but I think that was really just a testament to his tenure in the cellar at Freemark Abbey, which, 20 plus years as cellar master and not wanting the wine to be out there until it was ready.
Mhm.
Incredible patience and fortitude. Now that's still a tradition that you continue today.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I mean, it's one thing that we started, and after it started, it was an easy thing to keep up. But yeah, it's um, I think it's one of the most appropriate things, and I'm glad we started the wine as well. Here, there's a funny story about that. So when we released the wine in 2009, it was sort of like the peak of the recession. So it was probably like the worst time to release a premium wine with the name that's very difficult for a lot of people to pronounce. So I went back later and I told my dad, because when I told my dad, when I said, "Hey, why don't you just make wine?" I was still in high school. So, I mean, what did I know, right? So later on, I said, "Hey, Dad, what were you thinking letting a high school kid talk you into the wine industry? Because this is really hard." And what he told me, I'll never forget to this day. He said, two things were going to happen. Either we were going to sell the wine, it was going to, people were going to enjoy it, or it wasn't going to sell and I get to stay home and drink it all. So
Words of wisdom.
yeah, yeah. So for me, what that tells me is he really doesn't make wine for anybody else but himself. And I think that's what makes it special, because it's his sort of ideal interpretation of what a Napa cab should be based on, his experience in the Valley.
No, it's incredible. And I like that aging prior to release until it's ready. And it's tonight's topic from an education standpoint is age-worthy wines and how to make an age-worthy wine and some of the factors that go into it.
Mhm.
But we're going to launch our first poll question. You in the audience can't answer it. You can, but you'd be wrong. For truly expressive age-worthy wines, it's best to start with organic fruit, high elevation fruit, valley floor fruit, somebody else's fruit. I just added that one. It's not even on there. Aged vines. And while people are humming the tune to Jeopardy and getting ready to answer, I will say hello to Chad Angelo, Diane Yetter in Chicago, Doug Rutherford in Minnesota, Eric and Lauren Klein back in the house, Hans and Caitlin Greasy from Colorado, Jim Gift, who was just out in the Valley down in Tampa, Jeff and Jane, Julie Fogarty, Catherine Jerica, Linda Forsyth. Linda Forsyth might know someone here. Mark Shallenor, Peter Glick, and Scotland Kiefer's in the house so far. All right, so we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Those are actually 4 answers: organic fruit, high elevation fruit, valley floor fruit, or aged vines. And I don't know the answer to, from a Delgadillo Cellar standpoint, from the Freemark Abbey standpoint, when you're going to make an aged wine, what are some of the most important attributes?
I would say the one, probably the most important attribute is acidity. So acidity is probably one of the most important structures in aging a wine. And the way I would describe acidity in terms of how it affects the wine is, if we think of wine as a human body, right? The fruit structure, those characteristics, that's like the flesh, the muscle, and the acidity is like the skeletal system, so like the backbone.
Okay.
So having a good acidity is what's going to keep it basically propped up over the years. So our age cab, one of the reasons we choose, or what helps it age well, is we look for that acidity and sugar balance when we harvest the wine.
So that from an age component, worthiness, acid being the most important thing, then tracing acid back to the vineyard at harvest. So pick date, very important.
Pick date, yeah. So then weather plays a huge role in that. So the 13, actually I have a bottle here, I'll just put it up so we can look at what we're talking about. So the 13 cab, so this is the age wine. So 13 is our current release. This is all from Coombsville, and Coombsville is a little bit cooler,
right,
relative to the rest of the valley. So what that does is it gives us a higher acid sugar balance. So if we think of 2 inverted curves, sugar down here, acid up here, at one point they're going to cross and meet, and we want to pick when those 2 meet, right? The cooler climate allows us a little bit more hang time to give us more mature sugars.
Mhm.
So it pushes that curve out a little bit. So it gives us a little bit higher acid maturity combo. Because if you don't pick at that cross point,
Intersection, right?
yeah, so your sugars are going to go higher. So you get that longer, more like jammy characteristics, but your sugar falls off. So that's a great wine. That's going to taste fantastic out of the gate. A lot of fruit, but it's not going to hold longer than a wine that has more acid to it.
So then the acid sugar balance has seemingly a lot to do with temperature
Mhm.
of where, like, are you going to find age-worthy wines up here in Calistoga that have that high acid, given that it's often 15, 20 degrees warmer than in Coombsville?
Well, you could. I mean, it all has to do with acidity. So as we know, a lot of European wines, they don't even recommend drinking them until they're like 15, 20 years, and that's because they have a lot cooler climate, so they get a lot higher acidity, and the grapes really aren't given the time to mature like they do here in Napa.
Right.
So that's why they're able to hold that longer, and it needs that time to really mature in the bottle. So you could, I guess, technically harvest anything a little bit under maturity and get that, but it won't be a wine that's going to taste
Good.
out of the gate. yeah. Or and I would say good is relative, right? Because in California, I mean, Napa in general, what we like is that big fruit, right? So we're always known for having excellent fruit and all the other attributes. So it's all relative. The way I look at it.
Question from the studio
Yeah,
audience.
yeah. Sorry.
So they're just asking what the answer is.
None of the above.
None of the
That's
above.
what they thought.
Yeah. Whoever wrote that question, terrible question. So the fruit acid balance, I think, is interesting because you're right. There is, most of the Napa wines are known for their fruit forwardness.
Mhm.
Some of them, it's a much smaller pedigree or stable, if you will, of wines that can age.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting that all depends upon acid and how much does tannin play a role.
Tannin plays another role. So everything, I would say everything, especially like in a cab that's a big bold wine, everything plays a role. So you have tannin structure, you have the fruit structure, you have how much alcohol is in the wine. Really, and I guess I can even go as far as saying this is like the secret to life is balance, right? So you need to start with good balance in all these regards. So you have everything that kind of plays in. So again, talking about the cab, the way I kind of look at it is, especially a Napa cab, I mean, it's called King of Grapes for a reason, right?
Right.
But I look at a young bottle of young Napa cab and I think of it as like a teenage guy, right? So bold, strong, but not necessarily a whole lot of depth.
Or
right?
mature.
Or maturity, yeah. And so so when you
No comments about even older people and lack of maturity from the audience. Okay.
so when you age a wine like that, it's like that teenage guy just maturing, getting life experience, and then everything kind of mellows down. So you don't have the oak fighting for your attention. You don't have the acid and the fruit and the tannins all trying to fight for your attention on the palate. They all kind of blend in and tell a story all together. So you get a little bit of acid, a little bit of fruit, a little bit of tannin, and nice oak on the finish. They all kind of integrate the longer it is in the bottle, and balance is important. So
I was
not
just going to say,
each one of those kind of falls off.
that's the huge component for us anyways. And striking that balance is part of the challenge because
Mhm.
you can have one that's high alcohol and you'll feel that burn right out of the gate.
Right.
And that doesn't soften a little bit. Or you have one that's so tannic that you can't drink it for 10 years.
Mhm.
So finding each one of those contributing factors to kind of play its instrument in the orchestra, not the solo, but has to blend in. That's important. And
Mhm.
when you have that from an age standpoint, it's amazing. And we've loved your wines for 10 years. So you guys are dialing that in very well.
Oh, thank you.
Talk to us about kind of the overall portfolio and the red that's in everyone's glass right now.
Okay.
Should be.
Well, if not, we got an extra bottle over here for everyone. So the red came about years after we had started. So we started with the red, and it's called the red, and I'll get into that in a second. So we started with the 2009 vintage, and what happened was every year since 2001, we have wine that's left over, and it's not necessarily because it's less quality, but it's like cooking with the best ingredients. You're not going to throw everything in there because you want that balance, right? So we blend all the components that we have after harvest, after it's been fermented and aged in barrel. We blend to get that balance that will achieve us the age worthiness in the wine.
What are some of like how cab dominant is it? How
So no, it's 100% cab.
100% cab?
It's 100% cab. We like to keep it, at least in this one, single vineyard. And the reason is because we like it to really be an expression of that specific vintage. So it's a memory, so to speak. So whatever was left over, we were selling as basically, we were selling as bulk wine. So jug wine. It was heartbreaking to say the least. Yeah. Yeah.
Literally the best jug wine
Yeah.
ever in the history of the world.
Yeah, because we didn't really have a program at that time. And finally I got, I told my dad, I said, you know what, I'm going to take this leftover wine, I'm going to blend it, and then you let me how to figure out how to get rid of it. So that's how the red was born, because I wasn't allowed to call it a cab because this was my dad's ideal interpretation of a cab. This did not have the pedigree that this had, right?
Okay.
Even though they're both fantastic wines. So I said, okay, well, I'll just call it red. I won't even call it anything different. Our brilliant marketing plan.
Right.
So I called it the red, and then it kind of evolved to what it is now, and it's still 100% cab. The 15 vintage is when we actually put Cabernet on the label because we realized it's such a good cab that it needed the respect that it deserves. So we finally put cab because a lot of people were thinking it was a blend of different vintages, but it's still 100% cab. So that's how I got the name. The red, this profile is a lot more fruit friendly, fruit forward. And the way I would describe these two wines is this is the wine that encourages you to drink it faster, which can be a little dangerous. And it's because you get that huge fruit explosion up front.
Right.
And you get a nice explosion all the way to the mid palate, and then it tapers pretty sharply. So what that does is your mouth wants that explosion of fruit again. So you're constantly going back to the glass.
Interesting.
And drinking it. The cab, the aged cab, I should say, that one is the complete opposite. So it's got so much nuance to it that you open it up, you get the fruit, and then you get a nice complex mid palate, and then you get a nice finish that just kind of lingers. So it slows you to, it kind of slows you down because you're still tasting it after you've had a sip. So those are kind of like the two differences. I call this one the Netflix and pizza wine. So grab a good movie, a good pizza, and then just chill.
I like it. And I also like it's a great analogy because this one does force you to slow down because there is so much nuance and so many layers that you are not just going to drink that fast because it's like a great jazz ensemble. You're just listening and it's evolving in the glass over time. Especially your current release is 8 years of age. So that has had a lot of barrel age on it to soften, to evolve, to have all those attributes that you mentioned earlier kind of weave together. So tasting all those layer upon layer of very, very good stuff. It's good wine. I'm a big fan of that wine.
Thank you.
You also have for anybody that has purchased wine from Napa that has come in wooden cases, 90% of the time it's your company or your company that your father started to put you through school. Have you thanked him for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah. Every once in a while. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been, he's always been a great, a huge inspiration in my life for a lot of reasons, not only because he's been able to provide, but, a lot of the values that I've grown up on also come from him, just hard work and being a good person gets you pretty far.
No, you're farmers at the end of the day, for the most part. And farmers have always been traditionally, I don't care what the crop is, soybeans, corn, cotton, wine, or grapes, rather. It's one of the hardest jobs. So anybody that has worked for a vineyard, we have some great vineyard folks here and winemakers, and it's a non-glamorous when you're covered in grape guts during harvest and that sort of thing. This is the glamorous part, live shoots, beautiful locations, but it is a very, very hard job. And every now and then you get miracles like what you decided to treat us with. And I encouraged, we'll pour some glasses of this, but this is a 1987 Freemark Abbey that Iggy was kind enough to talk about from an age-worthy standpoint, the different attributes, the different characteristics. So what are we going to see and experience in this now that it's, who's got a calculator? How old is that one? It's what? Thank you. 34. Uh,
So I brought it, considering we're talking about age-worthy wines, I figured I'd bring in an aged, a really aged wine, just to see what a wine does over this many years in the bottle. And it's very different. I mean, just even looking at the color, you could see this is like very stone brick red compared to a nice violet, sort of almost purple, that you get from a younger wine. And it's sort of like the next level of acquired taste in wine, because it doesn't have the fruit structure that we would expect. It's sort of got a little bit of funk to it.
still it's
Forest floor, but you can almost smell that acidic component to it, and that's the backbone that's kind of bright, bright in there. And so it's interesting. The first time I started opening wines like this was when my wife, when she turned 30, we opened up a bottle of 85. I think it was a Sycamore vineyard. And so we went to the restaurant, and I knew the somm pretty well. And I said, his name was Massimiliano. And I was like, hey man, so like I brought this surprise,
that was
to surprise my wife. And how long do you think we should decant this for? And he looks at the bottle. He's like, 4 hours. I was like, well, we're not going to be here at dinner for that long. I mean, we'd love to. So what I ended up doing is I had him pour me 2 glasses. So one glass about this full. And I just set that aside for about, for the 2 hours that we were at dinner, and I was drinking it out of the decanter in another glass. And it really opened up. And after that, I did try it for letting it decant for 4 hours. And the way it opened up was amazing. I mean, but you got to keep in mind, this wine really hasn't seen deep oxygen for
34 years.
Yeah. So as it absorbs oxygen and it sort of starts breathing back to life, it really changes. And not all wines have this characteristic. Some of them just taste like straight vinegar at this point.
Right.
But as this one, you could see it doesn't have those vinegary characteristics, but it really doesn't have the fruit that
It's not
this one does.
hitting you in the head right off the bat. No, but it has those tertiary characteristics where it has kind of that soft, dried herb cherry, like you said, the forest floor, but it's amazing.
Mhm.
And
Oh yeah, the acid on the palate is bright. Yeah.
vineyard sourced for the red.
So this is 2 vineyards that we farm. Both of them are in the Napa Valley. So we have whatever's left over from Coombsville from this guy that gets blended into our Mill Creek Vineyard. That's here in St. Helena, right across from the Bale Mill,
Okay.
right by the Napa River. So that gets blended. Both of those get blended in to create this guy. So our barrel aging program for the St. Helena fruit is a little bit different than this. So as this is evolving, we're sort of changing the winemaking characteristics to kind of match the fruit style a little bit better.
And how do you do that?
So we've been experimenting with different barrels. We've actually experimented with a little bit of American oak with this one. And we found some really good American oak coopers that, I know American oak has a stigma that I, was believe back in, that it was for pickles and whiskey. It didn't belong in wine, but stuff has changed, and we're always trying to see to make it more fruit forward wine, because this is the wine that we recommend you age. This is wine that if you're impatient, you drink now.
Well, in the Mill Creek Vineyard we've been to,
Mhm.
and it's the one with those little baby vines
Yeah,
that are, no, actually the average age of those vines is how old?
those were planted in the 70s. So those what's left of that vineyard survived the phylloxera bug that it kind of, so it's all really old rootstock. And they are some of my favorite vines. Yeah.
Well, and these things are monsters. I mean, they almost look like head trained
Yeah.
Zin vines, because they are just sprawling 50 some odd year old Cabernet vines.
Yeah.
And you're right, the ones that are left, you can see the ones that didn't make it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gaps in the vineyard.
Yeah.
But you like that from the fruit standpoint, for the ageability, for the acid, for the complexity, all the above.
All the above. I mean, we look at that vineyard is very unique because it's got the young fruit has its own characteristics. The old fruit has its own characteristics. What's impressive about the old fruit is it's all dry farmed. So those roots have gone down and it's found its thing. And I mean, I don't know how else to describe it other than they're just like beasts of a plant. You know, some of them are like 8 feet tall. They look like trees, and it's just impressive to see how vines will adapt. You know, they will just grow their roots and then just produce fantastic fruit year after year.
Do we have in one of the videos with Iggy, do we have shots of those vines?
Yes.
Yeah, if pull up, and actually it might be the video that's on that website right now.
And I posted the link.
Oh, beautiful. Because those vines, they're massive. They are so cool looking. But I want to get to the second poll question.
Okay.
Because you don't know, Iggy hasn't seen these in advance.
I have not.
Jackie helped me write this one.
Oh, really?
No, I'm just teasing. All right. So if I wasn't crafting great wines and running the best wooden wine box manufacturing facility in the US, I'd be A, a farmer, B, off-road endurance 4x4 racing, a barber, male hairstylist, D, military sniper for hire, or E, performance vehicle mechanic and detailer.
Are you asking me that question? Oh man.
You or Denise or James?
First.
Wait, we'll let the audience answer.
Yeah. I want to hear what they.
I should have write-in answers.
Sniper.
Sniper. Barber.
Barber. We're getting a lot of barber polls. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The number one answer is a tie. Tie of farmer and off-road endurance 4x4 racing.
Wow.
So
Okay.
not chosen, interestingly enough, is barber male hairstylist.
That's okay. I think I don't think I would have lasted long in that field.
So is there any of those four other than the hairstyling that would resonate with you? Or if you weren't making wine and doing what you do, what would you be doing?
I gotta say, I've done, considering this last year, I've done all of them. So with last year, I've cut my hair a couple of times. So I've gone that far, and so I've done a little bit of everything on that list.
Military sniper for hire?
No,
no. I did not even know that was a
N-
vocation.
No, the closest thing is I've done distance competition shooting back in my previous life. So
Your previous life. You're pushing 30. What do you mean
so
previous
so
life?
yeah, no, I have not joined the military, but I have, yeah, I've dabbled in those things.
So what is distance shooting? I know we're off the wine topic here, but how far?
It was so this was the last time I went was about 6 years ago, before my kids were born, and it was 200 to 1,000 yards, just paper target competition shooting.
That's James. It doesn't matter how far you get out of sight, he can find you. Good to know. So we've got 2 reds in the portfolio.
Yes.
Anything else that you want to bring into the mix or have
we-
fun with? What are you thinking about?
We've dabbled. We have a rosé that I did not bring. We only made about. We only have about 50 cases of it. It was sort of experimental that we're testing, and it's got really good feedback so far. So I think it might come back. But you know, these two have been sort of the core for years. So that's why we brought them here today.
And what is case production on each?
This one's about 220, and this is slowly growing. I think it's about 300-400-ish. I forget.
And is that comfortable for you, or do you want to make this one up to 1,000, or still kind of just keep it and you can control it?
We're growing it organically. So we grow with what's available in terms of fruit, with what's easy on our workflow, and then just what's, you know, just what we're comfortable with. So we're not in a hurry to grow, and we're not, you know, have any plans to just shoot. But if it happens, it happens. If not, you know, we're comfortable with these numbers too.
I like it. I'm going to let people, if they want, Denise, turn on cameras, or I will do Google Earth beforehand, if that's okay. So we're going to share with everybody where it is 105 degrees.
This breeze is nice.
This
Though.
breeze is heavenly. Jeff and Jane, I saw the comment with the question mark. Not very nice. So here we are in the beautiful earth, and I want to show people where wine region is. And it's been funny. Cellar Angels has been in both valleys all week. Traversing Sonoma County and Napa Valley. And one of the things that we've had in the car with us is some of the team that have not been to either valley, and they've been amazed at the size of Sonoma. So I always talk about how big Sonoma County is, and you can go up and down Highway 101. And then when you get off 101, and we did a couple videos in Sebastopol, we were up in Occidental, you're up. I mean, it's a ways off the beaten path. Where we are right now, as it relates to Tamber Bay, is in Napa. And as Barry Waitte mentioned, we are way north up in the valley at his property right off here off of Tubbs Lane. And if I zoom in, I don't know how the latency is for everybody at home. You can see this equestrian facility that is unbelievable. There's paddocks, and Barry, what he decided to do during the pandemic was to build a high-end ambassador tasting room inside a state-of-the-art world-class production facility for his ambassador club members. But we are right down the road from Chateau Montelena. I'm currently employed here. So to give you an idea of where Tamber Bay is and where we're shooting from live, this is a place where if you're staying in Napa, this should be your first visit of the day, because you can come all the way up valley and then work your way back down. But as Barry said, 16 different SKUs and offerings: Chardonnay, sparkling, rosé, or white program, red program. But it's a great, great place. And Iggy, I would like to know, where would someone come taste with you?
So right now we are doing only private tastings at our winery, so by appointment. So the easiest way is just to go on our website. We have a little form on there, so you can request an appointment, and that's it. But you can always have a wine tasting at home too. So just grab a little wine and bring your friends. And
where's the winery?
So it's in Napa. It's one of the things that's always moving a little bit. So currently it's in a little industrial park in Napa. We moved everything there to consolidate, since most of our operations are in Napa these days. So it's easy, especially come harvest. So we're not driving up and down the valley, multiple times a day, and it's not prone to fires in the downtown Napa as it is the rest of the valley. So it kind of offers us a little safety these days. So a little bit of everything.
I like it. And is it a co-op, or is it your own, or do you split in space?
No, it's our own space. It's just a small little place where we have everything in one spot. And it's always sort of been that way, but we've been scattered all over the valley. So this allowed us to kind of consolidate a little bit. So anybody is definitely welcome to come visit and try the wines with us.
I like it. I did not know you had your own space now, so that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Denise, if you want to let people turn cameras on. I also want to let people know about a special announcement that Ignacio, again, there is no kinder industry than the wine industry. Barry let us set up here, which is amazing from a hospitality standpoint. But Ignacio, not only from a kindness of opening the Freemark Abbey, and Jeff and Jane Greasy, I did notice your comment about where did half the bottle go. So it's in our glasses. But Iggy also, by the way, if anybody has an empty glass that you would like to try some of this, you'll have to go buy it at, no. Hey, JR, can I borrow you? Grab that and
this one too, if anybody wants some of that.
And some of this. Thank you. So if anybody wants to make themselves available on camera, feel free. But you had a special announcement on this wine.
Yeah. So normally this is exclusive to our wine club. We've only allocated certain cases outside of it every once in a while, and you guys have always had a little bit. So this time we have some available as well for this campaign.
So there's only 220 cases made, only 220 cases made, and the Angels are getting access to 3. I like it. Bring it in. This is a special treat. This is the wine. The current release is the 2013, aged for 8 years prior to release. You just heard the story about his father, who was cellar master at Freemark Abbey. We joke when we talk about people of this pedigree that, they know where the bodies are buried, but they know where the special vineyards are. And we're fortunate at Cellar Angels to get to meet folks like your father and you, that you source for such meticulously small vineyards, but it comes through great friendships, taking care of great, producing great grapes and taking care of the contract and being vineyard management and growers at the same time. So this is a very, very special treat. So Denise, how does anybody get access to that?
The wine is now in the marketplace.
Ooh, so the wine just got made available on the website this evening. And that is a special opportunity to grab some of the Delgadillo aged Cabernet. And the red is, as I think, an awesome drinking wine. They're both awesome drinking wines, but I like the red from a standpoint of being ready right now. And I want to show folks, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Jeff and Jane remote from the Great Chain of Lakes. I love it. Camping. Do this. This is always what I should have done earlier. So for those of you that can see and that might be new, the SIP virtual tasting kit is what many of the folks have at home right now, where you'll have, if you buy the SIP kit, this is on the Cellar Angels website, you'll get 4 wines for each of the next Fridays. This will have wine in it from July 30th and September 10th. So all of those events, the Delgadillo 2016 Cabernet is what we're drinking right now, in addition to the Freemark Abbey. Freemark Abbey, not a paid sponsor, so every time I say them, it's just out of kindness. But also over here is the 2013 Delgadillo that Denise just put on the website. So we're very, very, very excited about that. But definitely check it out. And the SIP virtual tasting kits are really kind of the easy way, the easy entree into these Friday night forays into getting access to the winemakers and the neat access to the content that these folks produce and are able to share with us. So definitely do that. I don't know if anybody has, and I see Doug Rutherford sitting out on the beautiful patio in Minnesota. Cheers to that. I like it.
Cheers.
If anybody has, Denise, a question in the chat. Carrie Schuster says hello. Carrie, we've actually told the story the last time you were in the vineyard. Good to see everybody. A lot of laughter here, so that's always good. To taste with you, they make an appointment. I mean, you're, like I said, we see Elise, we see Kim here from Zoetic, and I just know how hard you guys work. What would surprise people that think it's all charcuterie trays and fruit and strawberries and stuff? What is the hardest part about your job?
The hardest part about my job is trying not to always have a good time. It really is. I mean, because especially with the challenges that we've had last year, you look back at things that you've sort of in one way or another have taken for granted, right? And so just being able to connect with people, share a story, drink some booze. I mean, it's like how can you ever even get close to complain about that kind of job? It's hard.
So when do you complain? You have a 1-year-old at home.
Yeah, the only time I complain is when I'm not doing more of this, really. But yeah, it's going back, it's all a balance, right? You don't really enjoy the good moments without some hard moments, right? And so being able to connect with people, just sitting down and, as you've had our wine tastings before, I talk about the wine as much as people want to listen about it, because most of the time I just want to listen about who's coming to visit, their stories, and we just start having a conversation. So the motto's always been, we make wine as a family, so we share it as a family. So anybody who comes in, it's like if they came home and we were having dinner. I would never go out to dinner with my good friends and I would just be hammering them about wine. We just sit down and talk, and if the conversation's about wine, then so be it. If it happens to be about cutting hair or
long distance sniper shooting,
then that's what it is. And so I love listening to other people's stories and being able to make wine. I get to meet so many different people and hear their stories, and that's a blessing.
Do you ever take the show on the road?
I've done it quite a bit. I haven't traveled in a while, and I'm hoping to maybe get back, because yeah, that's another thing, just seeing other parts of the country and meeting different people. And like today, just being welcomed and being friendly. I mean, it's just,
It
it's,
is good to see you and hug people again.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, no complaints. And I just wish I could just be doing more of it, and yeah, one of these days I hope to, pass the torch to one of my kids and maybe they'll take it up and we'll see how it goes.
Is that I know they aren't young enough. I'm sorry, question?
Yeah, when you're done there, I have a question about aging.
No, let's
Okay.
go to that one.
Iggy, when you're selecting barrels and doing toast, we talked about the wood selection.
Mhm.
Did we talk about toast? And
Yeah.
For anyone at home that I don't know if you can or cannot hear that, but the question was on barrel selection for aging of wine and how much of a factor toast, light toast, medium toast, dark toast imparts from a barrel standpoint.
Yeah, that's there's no fixed formula. So what it is and this is really where I always I guess defer to my dad because he has the experience, and no matter how much I learn and how much experience I have, I can never come close to the experience he has. So with aging wines, it all comes down to having all these balanced components and then blending at the end, right?
Mhm.
So how much of that, I mean, it all depends on the vintage, right? So you have your two factors you can't, your one factor you can't control in the vineyard is your weather, and what that plays into it. Then you have your barrel components. So we usually run about, depending, well, on the cab, it runs about 60 to 80% new oak
Okay.
on the blend. And that varies from vintage to vintage, depending on what kind of fruit we're getting in. So how that translates into the bottle. And that's sort of really the deep artisanal component of making wine is that blending part. So my dad's able to blend the wine and then look forward and say, this is what it's going to taste like in 10, 15 years. And
Wow.
so, not only do you have to know what you're doing into the future, but you have to remember what you did 10, 15 years before and have all those years in the middle, right? So it's something that, my dad will, we'll be blending one year and I'll think, oh, like, this is perfect. This is what we got. My dad's like, oh, this is similar to like, what we did in 1992. And we ended up changing this. And, now I would change this component to it. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and so that's where, so what percentage of barrels we did one year will vary to the next year. And it all depends on, but it's all done at the very end. It comes down to taste and how that's going to, that balance again.
Well, and I know from a balance standpoint, ageability standpoint, and the insanity that was 2020,
Mhm.
how much of it, considering how small your production is from a case lot, how much of an impact was
2020?
the fires?
Well,
Yeah.
2020, I mean, I got to tell you, 2020 was, for a lot of reasons, it was a challenge, but fire wise, it really hit close to home. So we came like this close to losing all of our bottled wine. So like everything from our library wines to all our current wines, they almost got burned down. The reason they didn't was because it was a metal building and the roof didn't catch on fire, but the fire was like right at the front door. And then if the fire didn't get us, we lost power for almost 2 months. So by a sheer miracle, I had secured 2 giant generators to keep the warehouses cool. Otherwise, the heat, because we had we had like record heat right after the fire, so we would have lost everything. So miracle. It was, I don't know what other way to say it. So but you guys will hear it here first. So I am there was some wine that was horrible smoke taint. So it definitely reduced our available capacity, but I am going to make a 2020 smoke taint vintage just for the memory. So years from now, when we open it up and it smells and tastes like an ashtray, but
That sounds like a blast.
it sounds like a blast. But going back to why we make wine and what's special about keeping in each vintage is what the environment put into that wine.
Right.
And 2020 was, that was our worst fire year for us in particular. I know other years have been devastating for other parts of the valley. But I will never forget that. So I want to bottle it separately and just have a little reminder
No, that's a good point.
of the, maybe I'll call it the dumpster fire or something. I don't know.
Well, it is heartbreaking as we are driving around the certain areas in the indiscriminate path of the fires.
Yeah.
And it's just your jaw drops and you're literally driving around silence and just looking at the devastation is incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, just the destructive nature when you're looking at a fire that close, there's nothing like it. I mean, it's like you feel insignificant to the powers that belong to nature. You're just like, I'm an ant
Right.
on an anthill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I see a question.
So that you know when a wine is ready.
So we're tasting wine. So the question was, how often do we taste wine to know when it's ready? So we're tasting wine constantly. The blending portion is probably the most intense. So we'll put down all the barrels. We'll go through and we'll teach each barrel and we'll write notes. And then what we'll do is we'll take equal portions of each barrel and blend them together, and then we'll taste it. We'll say like, well, what's it missing? Is it missing fruit? Is it missing acid? Is it missing tannin? Is it missing oak? And then we'll look at our notes and say, which one of these barrels had more of these characteristics? So then we'll bias it based on those. We'll try it again.
So now who's doing this?
My dad and myself.
And is there any, like, is there a third chair that you want to
No.
fill out? Like, so no one else, like an application I could sign?
I mean, you can come join us. So when I first started doing this with my dad, it was probably my least favorite because the wines taste nothing like this.
Right. That's where the magic comes in, is being able to project.
Yeah. Well, and talk about palate fatigue. The
Yeah.
wine is like ink black. It's super intense. And by the end of the day, you feel like the skin on the inside of your mouth is like peeling off. So to be able to just sit through a day of that, takes, to keep your palate alive, takes a huge skill. But to taste through all that, then to know, well, this is how it's gonna taste like in 1 year, 2 years, and what's gonna possibly taste like 15 years from now. That's where the real art and skill comes into play.
And
so
how long is the barrel aging process prior to bottle?
it's about 24 to 36 months. So it varies on the vintage. And then the amount of new oak versus neutral oak that ends up into the final blend also varies depending on what fruit we get. And so then when you taste the two vintages, or two vintages side by side, what we try to, well, sorry to go back. So at the end of the day, what we try to do is we try to separate our small vineyards into as many different components as possible to give us the biggest play with all these little nuances that we can play into the wine.
I can imagine as you're sitting there, let's say you're in month 24 of barrel, and when you're tasting all of the barrels, you're like, okay, well, this still needs a little bit more time because there's a component missing that I know from more barrel aging will get accentuated. But is there ever a time where you're like nervous that, okay, we've got to get this in bottle?
Yeah. There are times, well, that happens all the time. And so, sometimes one barrel you'd be like, well, this needs to get locked in where this snapshot in time right now needs to get done. But there are others that need maybe another 6 months, another 8 months. So that's where you play with barrels and tanks. So like we have stainless steel barrels. So if we find a barrel and we want to like basically freeze it in time, we throw it in
some stainless.
It's airtight and it just kind of stays that way until the rest are ready. So there's a lot of stuff that happens, but really not a lot of it is. I would say it's not really a secret, because at the end it really comes down to that final blending. The entire winemaking process, for us at least, if you pick up like a winemaking for dummies book, it's pretty much like that. We have, we're very clean and throughout the whole process. We ferment, we put in barrel, and then we're just tasting. So if this is done, it goes into something to freeze it, in time. Not a whole lot of complexity. What gets complicated is that final blending process. That's where all the magic happens.
And then do you pull bottles like on the 2013? Did you pull it in 2017, 2018, 2019? And you're like, nope, still not ready yet. Still not ready yet.
Yeah. We taste them from time to time just to make sure they're on that right path. But now this is our, now we, with 2020, this is our 20th vintage under our belt. So it's built sort of that consistency where the blending is pretty consistent. So what I was trying to get to earlier, the two things that change from vintage to vintage are the two things we have no control of, is time and weather. Everything else, the way the balance that we try to blend for is pretty consistent for year after year, because you need it to have it hold on. But yeah, I mean, I would say the the real magic, everything happens at that blending period, and it's all based on experience and a lot of just stuff that
Trial and error.
trial and error. Yeah, I mean, it's stuff that I can't. I mean, you could probably write a book about, but I think that even discounts the nature of what we're doing or what my dad's doing, because it's art. I mean, there's no other way I could put it.
No, and I think you put it fantastic. I mean, it is art in a bottle. The 2013 I know is going to be special, and we are thrilled that you shared 3 cases with us. The red is in and of itself just fun to drink right now.
Yeah, it's a great.
So it's perfect. Ignacio Delgadillo on age-worthy wines. Any other questions from the audience? Is the audience still here?
Yeah.
It was very quiet audience. All right, anybody at home? Every year is different. Chad Angelo, winemaker himself. Absolutely
every
true.
year's different. Yeah.
All right, cheers. Thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties. Thank you for putting up with on location, 105 degrees in the shade. Thank you, Barry Waitte and Tamber Bay, and thank you, Ignacio Delgadillo. So good to see you. Cheers to everyone.
Cheers, guys.
See you next week when we're going to be talking to Jack Seafick from Cast Wine Cellars. 2 weeks. Summer white wines. 2 weeks. I can read. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe. Be good to one another. Cheers.
Cheers.